Hello everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Heidi Schiller and I'm a librarian here at the library, and I would like to welcome you to our reading tonight with Joyce Goodwin and Dennis Bolen. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kathy Scrimshaw, who is the past president of the North Shore Writers Association, to introduce Joyce.
Thank you, Heidi. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Joyce Goodwin. Joyce is a native of Dublin, Ireland. She came here to Canada with her family in 1989. Joyce is a former social worker. She worked in child protection and with special needs adults and children. She's traveled extensively throughout Europe, North America, India, Afghanistan, Nepal. These are things, I didn't know this about Joyce until she sent me her biography last night, but it's all reflected in her writing. Now, since her retirement from social work, Joyce has led an extremely busy and creative life. In addition to being a writer, Joyce is a prolific artist. She's a member of the Highcroft Painters. She's on the Fine Arts Shows Committee for the University Women's Club at the Highcroft Manor. She shows her art regularly in various locations around the North Shore and Vancouver. And in her writing, Joyce is a longtime member of the North Shore Writers Association. She's, in my view, one of our most valued and valuable members. She's an enormously hardworking volunteer. She's co-founder of our literary cafe titled Dare to Be Heard, and that's moving here to the library next month. If any of you'd like to join us, you're more than welcome. She's currently our speaker coordinator. She's been vice president and president in the past. She's also an executive member of the Canadian Authors Association. She's been a judge and a trustee for a national literary contest. I could go on and on. This is only about half of her bio. To get to her writing, her short stories, articles, and poetry have been published in newspapers and magazines. She's in 19 anthologies. Her poetry is etched into the glass at the Newland Valley Public Library. And I did read her artist statement that she did send to me as part of her bio, because I think that if you're creative in one area, that philosophy carries you through all your other creative endeavors. And she says that through her visual art, she strives to share some of the journeys she's been on. And her life has been one incredible journey, very varied and diverse. And I think that it comes through in her writing in spades. And she's going to share some of that with us this evening. So please welcome Joyce Goodwin.
Next, thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Heidi, for inviting me. And it's very nice to be sharing the stage, as Dennis calls it here, too, with Dennis. We've done this a few times lately. And family and friends and my sons, my goodness, one of them has a birthday today. Happy birthday. So lots of lovely, familiar faces. Very nice. My first poems tonight are Ireland related, and but they're set in a country that's very different from the Ireland of today. So, looking back. Bloodstones. Turn over any stone in Ireland, it will bleed. Sorrow for generations lost through hunger, war and treachery. Invader and vanquished now passed on. Deep in fissured limestone, their blood spilled on fractured ground, seeped into crevices. Their bones lie scattered down the long dark days of history. Turn over any stone in Ireland and it will bleed. I had a windswept childhood. Memories of childhood chasing a swirling tapestry of leaves and dreams. Imagine a child called Anemone, flower of the wind. I was young in that place, where my past now comes running towards me. voices carrying on the wind down all the days of my life. Me running along cliffs, my heart blown sideways, wind-tucked hem of skirts on the precipice of continent, ragged edge of Europe. A wind-blown child I was there in that place, on the cusp of tomorrow and possibility. In the northwest corner of Ireland, there's a place called Donegal, and a few years ago, a friend of mine, quite a few years ago, a friend pointed out a little graveyard and said that that was especially for limbo babies. I was shocked. Limbo babies, babies dead before baptism, were banished to limbo. Grieving mothers were shamed. Rome counted lost souls. No forgiveness for earthly angels, condemned to languish between heaven and hell. Their tiny remains buried without markers, in ground unconsecrated. No blessings allowed. Now Rome has recanted. Limbo is banished. The babies were innocent after all. The earth is rejoicing. Translucent skin of snowdrops, nurtured by tears, are reborn in silken remembrance. Too late for tormented, unforgiven mothers. Suffer the children. I come from Holy Ireland, where pulpit power was no idle boast. Filth and fornication, the biggest sins. Home to the devil incarnate, priests with lying tongues and predatory fingers. Dirty secrets and a moral code of silence. I come from people betrayed. Innocence lost, condemned to a living hell, crying out even now from the grave. Suffer the little children. God made sure of that. More recently, there was the Celtic Tiger for about 10 years, and then came the bailouts, and everything went wrong. I call this Irish fat cats. Where do they come from, those smart Alecs with their helicopters, Spanish villas and fake tans, smirks, winks and nods, backslapping howies? Ah, go on, take a chance. Tell them I sent you. You'll be made. It felt good. That the politicians fleeced the people, got rich on their money, threw it up against the foundations of the state, started borrowing to pay the bankers who crippled Ireland. Now they can't run fast enough, the bankers and developers fleeing to the Costa del Sol. Who'll save Ireland this time? Bombers and murderers from up north? We have new martyrs now, the Irish people. New saviours too, God help us. Scavengers from Europe who want our souls. The vultures are moving in and the corpse not even cold. I am of Ireland, an island of music and mist, murder and blasphemy, bog and limestone, turf fires and Atlantic spit, rainbows and disappointment. I am of foghorns and poetry, saints and sinners, jigs and reels, from a long line of storytellers, dreamers and wanderers. My name is Diaspora. I wrote this poem when one of my sons went on walkabout in Australia. Songlands. My boy child left home to live a dream, singing along songlands in Australia. Sky ancestors from the dream time sang into being that land. Here in Vancouver, changed by this parting, I recreated myself, learning to let go slowly. Here trees lost their cover in deciduous surrender, wind-snapped branches echoed disconnected lives. Distant voices fade as small leaf footprints cross the forest floor, recalling a child, chasing leaves, a boy running. Now in this season of separations, when tall saplings guard the future, my child, young man, creates a new dreaming, sitting in Australia. I just throat was dry. Oh, it's there for a reason. So So a new topic now, living in this beautiful neighbourhood. Living where we live is very close to the natural world. And this poem I call Walking on the Wild Side. Some of you are familiar with. With stealth it creeps towards us, the wilderness. Forests mere extensions of our North Shore gardens, where wild creatures recognize no boundaries between the two. There are deer amongst daffodils, raccoons on roofs, skunks under steps, bears in our bins, coyotes cross curbs, and cougars prowl the trails. Encounters with wild things is an unspoken promise. In the night, 1,000 glowing eyes watch over us. We live on the edge of two worlds, our own and the one across the water, with its concrete and glass illusions. Two iron bridges span the divide, each a colossus with a foot in both worlds, connecting them. We cross bridges as we would a tightrope, balancing two sides of ourselves, the tame and the untamed. We live with the untamed and walk on the wild side. I am a listener. I hear dew slip from leaves, silk spiders spinning gossamer, butterfly wings painting clouds, a translucent rendering, a diaphanous sweep of sky. I hear velvet sigh as roses unfold, and when trees stretch their limbs beneath the rooted earth, I hear muscle tearing underfoot. At night, in bed, wide-eyed, I listen to the forest. Shadows darkly green hide predatory nights. Muffled shrieks of animal extinctions ravage my sleep, while the dawn with murderous intent stalks my restless hours. Speaking of predators, I have a poem about Brackendale eagles, which you're all familiar with. Eagles of Brackendale. Icy winds whip the Squamish River, churning white water, rattling stones along the banks. Trees of crystal bone host hundreds of motionless birds, sculpted, it seems, from the frozen limbs they inhabit. Beneath the leaden sky, a silver thrashing of salmon, then ravenous raptors, spurred by hunger and prehistoric memory, swoop, talons curled to claw the pink flesh of survival. From time to time, we on the North Shore do cross the bridge and go over to the other side. When we cross the second narrows, we pass the Hastings racecourse. And I wrote a poem for a Mexican jockey called Mario Gutierrez. Mario was here, a jockey from Mexico, with magic hands and a preternatural way with horses, riding them like a dream, reins of soft leather telegraphing their brains. Feeling in his quiet hands how much horse he has under him, a rare bond, a gift, the power of touch, he releases an unfathomable spirit. Inhabiting his horse like a centaur, Mario, caught between two natures, has an intuitive sense of time and space. The thoroughbred, I'll have another, understands him, thinks like him, trusts him. Running like the wind, both need one more race for glory and immortality. But racers must be made of iron to win the Triple Crown. Horses run on shoes of steel. Thoroughbreds are made of glass. This time the glass cracked. The dream was shattered. Vancouver I call Terminal City. The city cranes its glass neck, cracking the snow-grey dawn high above Broad Street veneers. Crystal mountains mirrored on winter walls, a reflective mirage, the sharp glitter of urban dreams. On Robson Street, scavengers scurry past city rats rummaging behind two-faced windows. City life is an optical illusion for delusional figures doing tricks in an alley behind Gore. Terminal City is the end of the line. The alleys are strung out with unbalanced tightrope walkers, splayed with crippled acrobats, high-wire acts gone wrong. The fallen now practice their tricks on city streets with center lines, in an act but a few can survive. This one I wrote some time ago, imagining being in the welfare line at a labour exchange was more set elsewhere, but anyway. Down the sunshine with its smiling faces. What is spring but another season? Here in line people wait, fuming. I am fuming. A call, my name, a smile. Back again, sign here please. What has she got to be smiling about? You'd think she's glad to see me. One at a time, grown-ups like children, like beggars, like bloody beggars get handouts, payouts, paid to go away, get lost. We are lost. Lost in our thoughts, lost on the dole, social insecurity. I might become famous someday. That would shake them. They'll beg for my autograph. And I refuse. That would teach them. I could sign whenever I please, not every Tuesday at 2 p.m. I hate 2 p.m. It makes me sick. Who's next? Stupid question. I'm standing right in front of her. My turn to be invisible. Sign here. No smile this time. Must be a bad day. Definitely a bad day. Busy. Must be 30 people in the room staring ahead, stoned or whatever, staring at the floor. What's with the floor anyway? It's cold in here, the windows are too big, no insulation. Nobody insulated in here. Wouldn't fancy working at a labour exchange. Too cold and depressing. Next. And finally, I have a fun one. I was babysitting my grandson, who was nearly 3, and Declan. He doesn't have much language yet, but he has all the emotion he needs. No means no. He drops to the ground in protest. Reminds me of my Vietnam protests. Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Stop the war. No. The child doesn't want to leave the playground. No. Language failed us back then, so we dropped to our knees and had to be dragged away. My grandson uses the same tactics to great effect. It's a bug. I want to see the spider. I know, but I don't know where he is. I don't have all the answers to where the spider is. Where is the eagle gone? The bug is dead. Oh no, I kick it. The bug moves, but it's still dead. The wonder of it all, down to the essence, tiny life forms. Bugs are amazing. I tell him spiders catch bugs in their webs to eat them. Then I wish I hadn't. But if he asks me why, I don't know what I'll say.
Thank you, Joyce. Dennis Bolen is, where are you, Dennis? Oh, there you are. Good, you're still here. Dennis is a longtime prose writer and author of 5 novels and 2 collections of short fiction, published by Anvil Press, Random House, and Arsenal. His first collection of verse, Black Liquor, was published this past fall by Caitlin Press. And I actually told him that I thought he should be drinking a little, mug of whiskey or something up here, but he just wanted water, so. In a review of the collection in the Georgia Straight, Daniel Goffthorpe said this about Black Liquor. From rough justice on the island to the piss-stained ugliness of dissolute lower mainland life, Black Liquor nicely skewers the gentle hypocrisies of post-war Pacific Northwest optimism. Bolen's verse sucks the marrow of postmodern disillusionment with tenderness and irony, but without nostalgia. Such a great description. Please join me in welcoming Dennis Bolen.
Black liquor. I have a list of definitions in the front. Definition number 1, byproduct of the craft process, cellulose breakdown. Number 2, toxic water alkali soluble degradation components containing more than half the energy content of the wood. Number 3, carbon neutral renewable source for industrial power generation. Number 4, potable hydrocarbon infusion of organic molecules such as acetone, tannins, and furfuranol. Number 5, sugarcane distillate with specific gravity less than 0.919. Number 6, containing more alcohol than proof spirit, greater than 49% by weight of alcohol. Number 7, dark rum. Number 8, bile and or body humor associated with foul temper. I can't read you the whole book. It's 128 pages. I'm quite proud of that. I believe I hit a regional record for size of poetry book, actually, for last year. So through the miracle of modern e-reader technology, I have prepared you a mashup of what I consider to be the greatest hits in the book. I'm getting quite an echo here. Is my voice okay up there? Good. Okay. A little too close?
Yeah.
All right. Everybody knew somebody. Age of battered pickup. Cigarette load, ashtray butt. Everybody knew. Forest town slumber. Those who fell awake too late beneath the toxic blankets. Staggered at heft wood, metal, paper. Numb in the classroom. Bare somber books. Wrestle anachronism. Fear, war, and economics. At any moment, cover and duck and go away laid off from 1,000 mill jobs. Who daydream terminal and sleep off youth in the phantom mental mist. Seek the big exit. Slur wild in a rebuilt English sedan with the boom boom barking doors. Speak whole lives. Shout violent minds. Force the edge. Skid joyous in a barren parking lot of snow. Everybody knew. Grease quaff, armpit stain. Snaggle pick, match tooth. Beyond only the responsibly parented survive, everybody knew beltless toddler. Everybody. Unrestrained seat bench projectile to the outskirts of wisdom. Everybody knew somebody dead of car crash. And to the 1969 ambulance, what was the flame panic, the efficient terror, the flicker light sweep down dirt-side Milltown thoroughfare, but all was soon known, of course. A boy head-on and his sister, de-limbed aboard a motorcycle, girl, a schoolmate of mine, who'd turned to me in a class not a week prior, inquired after my closed-off girlfriend, how long we were and why we were not now. Did I hear clear what she asked me? In a burg of non-exception, working work, toilsome industry father, aborted school term, apathy turned paycheck reception, struck to watch the medevac lights off slow, short of the hospital. They do that, the industrial men said, when somebody dies in the ambulance. Slow down and take time not to kill anybody else. Consider the moment of the day in life. Stop pulling lumber and papercraft, wipe a face and scan community headline. Could I have saved her life? Run and ask the time or a dollar or a date? Halted for a second, the driveway revs, made fate disalign a swerve second? Next day, as the mills wrung black liquor, say again, ambulance, was there audio to emergency ears? Anything told? Hear clear what she asked me? Everybody knew. On that eon that we turned 30, we heard Ice Clink chorus by the Cocktail Dozen in that American bar Busy on a mystery side road outside somewhere in Wisconsin. A moment stunned by your hair flung on a turn to speak, we drank old fashions and sung your milestone. You did not know when or where life would go and barely cared. The miles and miles we'd come felt perfect. If only they would stop as the planet spun on and we stepped toward the mandate to strive and establish and proclaim. But synaptic soul desire draws back to that cherry glass night as we regaled within chocolate clothing our savory hearts sated on edible freedom. In the spectral warp of happiness, unclutched by wisdom, flowing out the spirit taps of the eternal tavern, atop eternal wood grain, a sheen of frozen whiskey. Everybody knew. Undershirt men, cross-eye sway fatigue, pace toward a next shift to hew and draw and maintain. Skirted metal box with wheels, rented concrete. Smoke death and like it, everybody knew, to cull those lucky not otherwise demised of proud ignorance. Out aside the tarmac, under breezeway shingles, huff, shoulder men to shoulder. Those whom fate determines suffer the splinter, bruise of forestry, rash abrasion, ragged cut. 20 stations haul 6 grades each. Fresh-hewn fir and poisoned cedar, cast-iron hemlock, lead log vengeful at the affront of being sawn. Alberni Pacific Division, longest green chain extant still in the 1973 lumbering world. The crush, tensile authoritative structural beings, to make lurchmen dream of ease, to fade a summer afternoon more than a beer after the shift, escape so far deep from hurtful heat, back crack, fatigue so drunken, horror of wet 2x6, 20-foot heft swarm in sodden stacks, and the tooth rake shriek, delight at blade rip into pure tree flesh, a fusion of diamond fleck, wet confetti about the world, of us millers deaf to the outside pleasance of poised time, mountain view and sea, a pleasing shape to put one's hand to. Everybody knew none should crave education. Drop out by 16 or you're not a man. Everybody knew a dream of gambling machines, bong being but hot for the change girl who was young but old. See us in a Reno bed months later, her old man getting out of the joint. Everybody knew you were thundering Jesus, Pete, going down the road, you guys. Pete, if ever the bacon did not fry under Joey's pretty low heat. When cars won't start because they're beaters, clunked in from neighbors' yards, bale wire coalescence of amateur nationality. Chug Suds Club bottle intoxicant for purpose of further relax amid the general recline. Yes, I see the road before us, your fist upon the knuckles steer. Look back, smilesome, damned. Everybody knew, alcoholic, frown, drink, burp, asleep, door slam, solitary. Everybody knew love cost money, time. Everybody knew your gentle step narcotized me. When you see me, my eyes, I'm safe. Your hair is a nest I want to infest. You thrill me with confidence. I like the look of your fingers. Your quietness rests in beautiful music. I envy the words you read, your house, your cat. Your spins make my head stand still. Remember, the visual whirl, mental dervish. Either way I come to you, hearts missing. Everybody, can we not try to free all the fleeing women who dry scream tattered flower hearts, yearn love permanence as artificial bell to insufficient man maimed in mascara fraud, and send him to sputterdom punch clock hell? And at the grand rally for weathered alley drunks, forlorn, never found nor looked for, a psalm of faux happiness in eternal obscurity, to assuage the daily live nightmare and deliver dead boredom's final purity. Everybody knew men curse, weep, shout, things broken. Just wait, I'm thinking about you on a bus to somewhere, and me, swig, scowl at the wall. Everybody knew, but would not all hail. The government office musician, bureaucrat novelist, stenograph ballerina, file cabinet actor, and the system analytic performance artists who secrete themselves amid the memos and soft-head algorithms and emerge nightly, having funded their search, underwritten national life, financed the thought that by sheer emergence keeps us riding and riding. Everybody knew when the truck flies, everybody off the road. Swat the kid who won't shut up. Fiddle the dial radio. Lenten sad song. Soon silence. Thank you. I do have some fun stuff. People have read my books, my novels particularly, and marveled at the comic flair that I have. But I tend to default to the seriousness when I'm standing in front of a bunch of people who are staring at me. This book here I put out a couple of years ago, and it's about the generation that was born in 1945 to about 1960. I'll just read you a page of it. Privilege. Oh man, boy, have I got an answer for that. First of all, and most important, you have to understand, not all of us made it. Not by a hell of a long way. Despite what the X, Y, and Z, and A, B, C, D, F generations whine about it. Sure, every generation has its cadre of losers, but mine's overlooked, and that's just my point. There's plenty of us boomers didn't get the jobs, didn't buy up the houses, didn't clog up the university departments and management suites. Not all of us are queued up ordering somebody younger to make us a latte. Most of us languished in dead-end office jobs or doing mindless manual labor. Most have trouble getting our cars fixed and can't figure out what we're doing in life. A lot of us tried to make lifelong friends and saw them stomp away. Lots of us looked for love, and if we found it, it left us just like everything else. Many of us sat raving in mail sorting rooms, pulp mill chemical chambers, check-writing computer payroll sweatshops, or hanging off the sides of mansions with paintbrushes in our hands. So many of us struggled with substances and madness. Most of us never got the attention of the world, but sure as hell ended up in detox, lost and bewildered. Some of us strove to capture time and failed as we should have. I know a lot of guys like me who tried to find salvation inside a lineup of women. None of us found anything we could remember the next day. And it goes on for pages and pages. At the same time, I am not known for love poetry. But I do have a section in this book here, because it is my first poetry book. And the tradition with first books, be it a first novel or a first collection of short fiction or anything like that, is the author can't believe their great fortune in getting published. And so they throw everything they can into their first book, because they don't believe that it'll ever happen again, down deep. So you will find quite a lot of stuff in first books. So in this book here, as you've heard, I cover the industrial world of the West Coast, the forestry and that kind of thing. But there's also a few tender moments in it. Though your tremolo heart may be kicked black, miracle eye glint will capture wordless jailmen, tame and refrain their reflected inner grime, supply sooty handhold to all but your own, cinderizing spell to unclasp the million cell doors and burn penitentiaries to the odious rooftops. Lady of the pages, litter of words, margin, prefix, and suffix in her hair, her eyes, the future, the truth of our inventions. Mystery, I said, in your face, craved and lost, but then crawled across my head, bit my ears for pain and comprehension. My hair in sparks. I cannot run, cannot walk unless you unplug me. Your silence is detention. I exist in expectation to hear electric waves of your face and the way your head tilts when it thinks. If what's wrong comes from something near my pituitary gland, I'll have it excised, pickled in Polski-Ogorki brine. If it's environmental, I'll climb a mountain somewhere, though I'm afraid of heights. Either way, I come to you, parts missing. You are your cats, grave, shy, under the bed, near imagined. Then, of course, there's the black with spots, bolts for the hallway, every chance. I'll wrap things up with this one last tiny little ditty. Shadow, the way your face leans toward me, this quiet place we talk. The words charm, tinkle and speak, make the dark important. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Actually, Dennis, can you come back up here? And Joyce, you too. We just have a few minutes for some questions, if anyone has any. And I'll go ahead and start. I'm just struck by how evocative both of your poems are in terms of sort of a sense of place. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your environment and how your sense of place influences your writing.
I don't something like, I think, what's the expression, you can take the girl out of wherever and you can't take whatever out of the girl, you know, so it's just there, it's a sound in my head all the time, and I think there's a rhythm to the language, the way I grew up speaking, and I think it's just I'm always amazed actually that something just sort of falls out every now and again. I go, oh, that's interesting, and you know. And I started with Shelley, and she said, go on, keep going, keep going. But yeah, the place is a very strong influence, as you can tell in some of the work. Yeah.
Well, you write what you know, and you know, we know the West Coast here. When I was growing up here on Vancouver Island and here, there was not a lot of West Coast Canadian writing. And what there wasn't always set in the West Coast. And as a young man, I set out to avenge that wrong. And virtually everything I've ever written, aside from an historical novel that's set half in Eastern Europe and half in North America, has been West Coast based. I find endless fascination in what's going on. I mean, we're becoming more and more fascinating as time goes by. And our population burgeons and things happen, and the city expands and things go on, etc. So, yeah, it's a good place to write.
Any other questions for these two?
Just a question for Joyce. I don't know if you've written any more of that where you really let the lyrical Irish sound and the chit-chat between different characters within the poem, because I just love that. I'd love to hear more of that.
So the question is, have you written
more of that?
More with
some kind of a conversational,
sort of Irish conversational dialogue. And Joan wants you to write more if you haven't.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, Joan, I'll keep that in mind.
It's beautiful.
But I have actually, because part of what I write is poetry, but I also write memoir, and I call it, I never know what to call these things anymore, but creative nonfiction, and in a certain setting. But yeah, I have characters that I really could develop more, like stories of my father that several people have heard of his childhood, and boys running around crazy in the middle of the blackened town and the IRA and all that kind of thing, you know. So I do have an awful lot of stuff I haven't finished, but I keep at it, you know. That's all I can say. But it's there.
Mark.
I have a question for the gentleman. You write very well about sawmills and that sort of thing. Did you ever work in one and that sort of thing in the logging industry?
So the question is, have you worked in a sawmill or some sort of an industrial kind of...
I do extensive research. Yeah, yes. And having worked my way through university, yes, I worked in the sawmills, I worked in bottling plants, I swept out places. I was also a clerk in a government office. Yeah, I've done the whole spectrum, and somehow work writing has been the major sort of central pillar on which I've put a lot of my prose writing and poetry writing, and that's another thing that doesn't get done very much is work writing, like and writing about standard sort of work. A lot of writing, particularly in Canada, is academic because it's done by academics and they've got the time to do it. A lot of working people don't have the time to write. It may not occur to them to write. That's changing quite a lot with all of the very accessible writing programs that are available these days. I know UBC is still quite academic. It's tough to get in there, but you can get into the Simon Fraser University writing program, the writing program, just audit and work with some pretty good writers and learn craft fairly quickly. And some great writers are coming out of that. Writers who write about their workday lives. So, yeah. Did I answer the question? I couldn't quite hear you.
No, yes, you did actually. Thanks.
And Bernice.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Just go ahead.
Bernice, and then the lady in blue. Mary.
I remember you performing, it's probably a year ago now, Dennis, with the music.
Oh, yeah.
And reading about your childhood. It was episodes when you were 8, 9, 10 years of age. And I thought people would be interested in how you can go about synchronizing your stories or your poems to a piece of music.
So, sorry, can I just ask,
Right,
was that at the Writers' Festival? that happened?
various places.
Oh, okay, so the question is synchronizing storytelling and music.
What I'm remembering is Word on the Street or...
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to be married to an electronic music composer. She is a musician and she plays the computer. And it's really quite something. There's more and more of those these days. It's amazing. So she and I have, over the years, developed a couple of shows where I read something like what I just read, the mashup that I did from the book, but she'll add sound effects and there'll be pauses and there'll be musical flights, etc. We're actually doing, there's a long poem in the book, about a 10-pager. It takes me about 15 minutes to get through it. And she has actually put it to like a really interesting piece of music and several other different types of sound effects. And we do this, we actually did it for our book launch in Vancouver a couple of times. And actually a week this Friday, we're doing it again in Vancouver. If anybody is on Facebook with me, you'll find out all about it, etc. But yeah, I love the form. The spoken word and music form is fantastic. A lot of my influences, and I'm sure you can hear it, are the beat rhythms, you know. And I really like the jazzy, bluesy sort of rhythm, word flow. And with a little bit of music behind you, it really, you know, it enhances the experience. I would hope for the listener too.
I would be interested in if both of you would comment a little bit about process. I'm not a writer, but I'm a painter, and procrastination is something I struggle with. I'm just curious to know, obviously you both have a passion to write and a real talent for it. I'm wondering if you have a routine, if you write when the spirit moves you, how do you approach process, just in general.
So the question is about process. What is your writing process? Do you want to start, Joyce?
Well, I started writing with a writing teacher, Shelley, who's here, and we used to have, not tips, what's the word?
Exercise.
Yes, exercises. And then you'd write from that, you know. So it's quite amazing then you get a word and you think, oh, I can't write. So you start by writing, oh, I can't write anything about this. And then suddenly you're writing and you find you're writing and suddenly you have a whole piece of work down there. And every now and then, if you keep doing that, I mean, I do that often enough that I just write with nothing, no expectation. And then I go, oh, and if I, go back and say, well, that's not bad. I said, I quite like that, But I think you have to really, and I don't think I do it enough, but you really have to just sit down and if you're not sitting down with your pen in your hand or your computer, I use longhand, but nothing can happen if you're not actually sitting there. So, and it's amazing the things that come out. But to put them together and make any sense of them, though, is a whole other matter, right? So then you have to edit. So half, I don't know, what do they say? How much is the writing, but the rest is the editing. But you have to. It's like the painting. You have to show up. And I don't have a routine like every day at the same time, but I can't not do it. It just has to happen.
Yeah, everything Joyce said. Poetry is a little less complicated. If the idea gets you, it's very important that you get to a writing space and get it down. Don't just think, oh, good idea, I think I'll remember it. No, you won't remember it. If you do, then it'll be quite a miracle. Maybe it's a really good idea then. I wrote novels, and they are ridiculously difficult in terms of time management. You have to, if you've got an idea for a novel, you've got to write down as much notes as you possibly can so that you can maintain your conception of this idea throughout the process, because the process is going to take you a minimum of months, even if you are really disciplined, of actual writing, sitting down at a table every single day. And you must do a basic, my rule about novels is once the idea is started, once the first page is written, one must crank out at least a minimum of something every day. And if you do that every day, even when you don't think you've got anything to say, the momentum of it all starts to help you. There's actually a psychological trick you do with yourself in terms of tricking yourself into saying, oh, I can't relax today, I've got to write my 2 pages or 3 pages or whatever. You get lucky once in a while and suddenly 5 or 10 pages splurts out of you because you created this wonderful psychological momentum. But it's the duration of particularly generating the first draft is one of the most uncomfortable, excruciating states of being that I can think of, and it's really no wonder that writers drink.
It helps.
Especially Irish writers.
All right. Any other questions? Kathy.
This question is for both Dennis and Joyce, but I'm thinking of something that Dennis was talking about before we actually started. And Dennis, you said you were either working on or thinking of a novel-length poem.
Right.
Or a novel done as a poem. And I wonder, you know, you've said that you approach poetry a little bit differently than novel writing. So how are you approaching this particular novel in the form of a poem? And Joyce, would you ever consider doing something like that? Because you're a very prolific writer. Would you ever do a novel-length poem?
No. I honestly, for some reason, I don't have any interest in writing. I don't think I have anyway. I don't have any interest in writing a novel. I prefer the idea of writing. I like the idea, or like to hear that some of my poetry is musical or rhythmical, or it has a certain sound. You know, I like that idea. But I prefer short stories, or the idea of putting together a whole bunch of short stories into a book that are linked. I can see them being linked. And I've sort of been working on that, I guess, for too long, but it's in process. But not a novel as such, no, I don't think I have the patience somehow.
Well, I'm proceeding with a fragmentary approach to it. I've got an idea for it, for this book. It has not completely matured in my mind, but meanwhile, fragments of it occur to me, and I'm writing it down. And because over the last 3 or 4 years of producing this latest book of mine, I've been working in wonderful free verse, which for a novelist having to stick with grammatical rules and things like that for so many pages now, it's a wonderful freedom to work to write verse, because you can just do whatever you want as long as you get the effect that you're looking for. So what's happened is that I've started writing little snatches of verse that don't stand on their own, but might just fit into a larger structure. So I'm kind of breaking my own rules about sitting down every day and getting a momentum going, and I'm just sort of accepting what's coming gradually for this idea of a book that I've got. I can't say any more. It's top secret.
Yes.
Dennis, can you just speak a little bit about the process between writing and being published for the wannabe unpublished individual?
Such a good question, and becoming harder and harder to answer in any definitive way. When I first started, back when I didn't need reading glasses to read the font that my books eventually got published in, it was the traditional way. You wrote a book, and then you started querying publishers, etc. And eventually somebody nibbled on you, and perhaps you did it. I got a short story published, and that gave me a little bit of a profile. And I went from there, and I got an agent. And well, actually, the first book I put out was almost self-published, because I found a guy who wanted to start up his own publishing company, Brian Kaufman at Anvil Press. He wanted to start up his own shop and didn't have any money. I had some money and I had some time, and I had a book that was there. So my book was the second one that we put out together, and it was successful. It got published or it got reviewed in the Globe and Mail. It was the editor's choice in the third week of June 1992. I will always remember that. And and then from there I got an agent. Then it was republished by Random House, and they signed me to a 3-book deal, and I was on my way. But that's the old way. Nowadays, what with social media, there's so much going on social media. Everybody's reading all day, every day. People, writers like I was 20 years ago, are publishing their work online now, mostly, and hoping that somebody picks it up and they get a lot of hits, and perhaps a print publisher might find them. In a lot of ways, it might be easier now to get some attention. Before the big electronic revolution or digital revolution, it was tough to take up the means of literary production. And nowadays, all you have to do is send off a manuscript to Amazon and pay the fee and register yourself and all that kind of stuff, and boom, suddenly you can make an advertisement for your book and send it out to as many people as you can, and get them to send it out to as many people as they can, and suddenly you're an author selling books. Or you're selling $5 downloads or $3 downloads or whatever.
Give it away free sometimes.
Lots of times, online it's a free thing. I hope that answers. I could go on and on. I mean, I could go on and on, like in terms of the specifics, but I don't have the voice to do it.
That's
all right. We'll talk later.
And we're actually, just to plug the North Shore Writers Festival, there is a panel at the North Shore Writers Festival on the current landscape of publishing, and Brian Kaufman will actually be on that panel, as will a whole bunch of people representing different forms of publishing. So that's on this Saturday, the 12th of April, for the Writers Fest.
I just have one further question. Did you have to shop your poetry book around a lot before Caitlin Press?
The poetry book was really, I was very fortunate because I already had a reputation. I happened to have reviewed a Caitlin Press book in the Vancouver Sun last year at this time. It was Kate Braid's wonderful autobiography about becoming a carpenter. And
Work poetry.
That's right, work poetry. Exactly, related to what I was doing. I also, I took it on my own. I found myself a poetry editor, a really wise man named George Pearley, who lives up on the Sunshine Coast. And I was working with him. I was going up there on the weekends and working with him. And he happened to mention that he knew the publisher at Caitlin. And so there was that connection. So I got in the door inside of a week. It was amazing. It's probably one of the all-time record send away manuscript, get accepted 6.5 days later type of Canadian stories. I do happen to know, though, a woman I studied with at Sage Hill, the Sage Hill Writing Experience. Anybody ever been there? Everybody ever heard about it? It's a place in Saskatchewan you can go for 2 weeks in the summertime. It's not that expensive, and it's a really wonderful place to absolutely concentrate what you want to do and be with writers. I met a woman at Sage Hill who wrote a book called The Best Place on Earth. Her name is Ayelet Savari. And she was just working on it then. And then the next September, that was July, in September I met her in Toronto when I was reading at a bookstore for the book I read out of here, the prose book. And she whispered to me, "Don't tell anybody, but I think I might end up getting published." And she had, the day before, this is in September of 2011, emailed, I think, HarperCollins and outlined what she was doing, her fiction book, which is a book, a short fiction book about herself living here and in Israel back and forth. So I mean, she's an Israeli Arab Jew. And so she's got all this mixture of stuff, and very, very international. HarperCollins got back to her in 90 minutes and said, can you come to our office right this afternoon? So she walked up to her office right that afternoon, and they talked. And they said, we'll get back to you. The next day, they called her and said, could you come in and sign a contract? So within one day, she got a short story book contract at HarperCollins. And she's been published now simultaneously in Canada, in the United States, and I believe in the UK. And being reviewed very well. I know, because I wrote the review. We're becoming incestuous, you know that, don't you? Because the book business is so damn difficult these days, and getting into the newspapers with a review is awfully difficult, because their newspapers aren't really that interested anymore. You have to really go up and shove it in their face and tell them, you've got to publish this. You know? It's a tough go. Somebody's got to do it. Yes, sir?
A little bit flippant, but the name of your book, poetry, is Black Liquor. You've mentioned liquor and booze quite a bit. Are you a bit my views of like Ernest Hemingway writing with a bottle of scotch on the side? And if so, how many bottles of scotch do you get through in a week?
I've tried it, but it just comes out gibberish.
You just won't admit to it,
No, sorry. I don't mean
Oh,
Scotch.
I like my wine.
I don't mean Scotch for you. I mean Irish.
I like Guinness, but I like my wine. I like too much of it. But just on the profile there, you know, we've had a few presenters at the North Shore and Canadian authors on author profiles, and that sort of, you know, that seems to be the current way to develop how you get known or how somebody will recognize you. I mean, you know, I have a hard time with it all, but you've got a blog, and you've got to have a Facebook, you've got to tweet, you've got to do all these things. It seems awfully time-consuming, but it seems awfully necessary. So, that's something you recommend, of course, for people too?
I totally recommend getting a public profile. It used to be, back in the day, you'd be assigned a publicist. I was assigned a publicist at Random House, and she drove me all around Toronto and arranged tours for me and all the rest of it, etc., interviews and things. The big publishers still employ somebody. They probably are contracting the work out to a freelancer, so they don't have to pay them as much. But just about everybody else is going to has to create their own public persona. And even the bigs now, and I was told by Ayla that this, as soon as she walked in there after she signed her contract and once the editorial process had gone along some time, she sat down with the publicist, and the publicist said, how many followers have you got on Twitter? How many friends have you got on Facebook? How often do you post, and what do you post about, and blah, 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 blah. It all went like that.
Okay, one more question. Bernice.
No, I was just complimenting the library because I think the work you do here, Heidi, and the fact you have the tech tutor, you can learn all the skills that you need to do social media free here in this library.
It's true.
And I think the North Shore is very good for various, whether it's 32 books or the meetings of the North Shore, there's an opportunity here. I mean, the group even has its own radio where they can, so that, I mean, everything is here for the writer to get started. And if you cause a buzz on the North Shore, they'll see you over the water.
On the other side.
Over the bridge.
Yeah, Bernice is right. We do have lots of social media classes here, and also opportunities for one-on-one tech coaching too. So if anybody wants to start their WordPress blog or start tweeting or Facebooking, you can come here and get free coaching on how to do it. So, okay. Well, I think we're about at that time. I want to thank Dennis and Joyce one more time for their excellent readings and answering all of our wonderful questions. Thank you so much. And have a glass of wine, and we will see you at the Writers' Fest, hopefully. Thank you again.